The ZeroPlay 360 sled is a multi-purpose sled that features a movable fence that can be set to any angle, and a dovetail grid that allows for many different holding solutions. Since many of us don't have router tables large enough to create this grid conveniently, today we're going to build one using the Grid Router guide, and only use the router table for necessary operations with shallow fence settings. These instructions are specifically for those using the Grid Router guide. We'll start with your selected material already cut to 22 by 20 inches. We recommend using 3/4 inch Baltic birch. First, we're going to cut the material down to 16 by 20. The larger piece will be our sled base, and the smaller piece will become our fence. The sled can be oriented with the longer dimension either parallel or perpendicular to the fence based off of your own needs. I'm orienting the long side parallel with the fence. Once you've decided, set the fence to just cover the blade slot, flush your sled base to the fence, and mark the center of your miter slot at the front and back edges, and draw a straight line connecting the two marks. It's wise to check 4-inch intervals horizontally to make sure that the dovetail grid won't overlap with the attachment holes. If an interval falls within an inch of your miter slot mark, offset your miter slot mark by the necessary amount, preferably away from the blade, and we'll cut off the excess later. Once that's done, mark the edge of the sled base that's oriented away from your fence and the edge that will face away from you when the sled is in use. Now it's time to route our relief grooves. Orient one of your marked sides to the left and clamp to your work surface. Set up a router with the appropriate bushing adapter on the Grid Router guide. Then remove the router from the base and install Microjig's 1/4 inch relief router bit. Reattach the router and set the depth to 11/30 seconds. I'm using the setup gauge for all my settings, which makes this quick and easy. The first relief cut is crucial, so be sure to apply appropriate pressure towards the material as you route. Each successive relief cut will guide the next. Turn the material so your other marked side is oriented towards the left, and repeat. With the relief grooves cut, switch out your relief bit for your MATCHFIT dovetail router bit and set to a depth of 3/8 of an inch past the router guide. This process is different from cutting the relief grooves. Again, orient one of the marked sides to the left, and starting at the second to last relief cut, work from right to left across the sled base. This is a good time to sand out your dovetail grooves to remove any grit or tear out that would interfere with the smooth motion of your track screws for your fence or of any other MATCHFIT hardware you may use. I recommend applying paste wax to the grooves afterwards to get the best results and smoothest motion. One easy way to apply this paste wax is to apply it to a MATCHFIT dovetail clamp and run that clamp through the groove. Now we can mark the mounting and adjustment holes along the miter slot line we marked earlier. Make marks at 1 3/4 inches, 5 3/4 inches, and 9 3/4 inches, and label the marks M1, M2, and M3 respectively. The adjustment hole marks will fall at 2 13/16 inches, 5 1/16 inches, and 9 1/16 inches, and will be labeled A1, A2, and A3. If you follow the marking and grid guide directions, this spacing should work out perfectly. So for the M1, M2, and M3 holes, you are going to need a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to start the hole to 5/16 depth, and then you're going to do a through hole in the center of those with your 1/4 inch drill bit. This is if you're doing it by hand. And then for the adjustment holes, you're going to use a 3/4 inch Forstner bit for all 3 of those adjustment holes. That's how you would do it if you were using your hand drill. However, I am going to be using the 3/4 inch Forstner bit for our adjustment holes and the ZeroPlay plunge router bit for our mounting holes. This is going to let me do both holes in one, both drilling operations in one pass. The ZeroPlay miter bar that comes with your ZeroPlay 360 kit is already going to have those hex head screws inside. You're going to have to loosen those to adjust them. When you place your ZeroPlay miter bar in your miter slot, it's a little bit depressed into the material, and depending on how far your screw is pushing through your board, you may not get the clearance that you need to get to your insert.
So what you can do is you can remove the bar and you can put some nickels underneath. And the nickels are going to raise it up just enough that that depression is now no longer so deep. Now we're going to be using the longer screws so that we have enough clearance through our board to be getting into the ZeroPlay bar. And you can always double check and make sure that you are below the bottom of your ZeroPlay miter bar.
To expand your miter bar to fill your miter slot with ZeroPlay, loosen the adjustment bolts slightly with the included hex wrench. Push the sled base towards the fence and retighten, keeping pressure to the right on the sled as you do. Test the motion of your sled in the miter slot. If you have play, you need to repeat with more pressure to the right. If you're getting resistance, repeat with slightly less pressure. The intended result is a smooth, gliding motion through the slot with no rotation play at all.
Ready?
With your miter bar set properly and your sled aligned with the fence, raise the blade just above the sled base material and cut off any excess. Now, your sled has a zero clearance edge.
So when you want to align the side of your sled to make sure it's perfectly parallel with the side of your fence, you just need to loosen up your mounting screws a little bit. And now when you bring your fence over, you can get it nice and parallel to your fence. So now I can tighten back those mounting screws. So now you're going to take the offcut piece of wood that you had, and you're going to cut out of it a 2.5 inch strip and then an 1.25 inch strip. So this is our 2.5. We're going to get this cut now. There's our 2.5 inch strip. Now we're going to do an 1.25 inch. You have your 2.5 inch strip and you have your 1.25 inch strip. And these are going to get glued together like this. And you're going to have a hole here where your track screw is going to enter in. And that is going to allow you to tilt your fence any way you want on your sled.
On your 1.5 inch strip, mark lines at 1.5 inches and 9 inches in from each end.
Okay, now we're going to mark a line between them at 1/2 inch deep. Next, at each of these two ends of each line, we're going to drill a 5/16 inch hole with our hand drill or on the drill press.
Set your router table with a 1/4 inch diameter straight bit at a 1/4 inch depth, and set the fence to 1/2 inch. Route between both sets of holes. Then flip the material end over end and repeat. Raise your bit slightly and repeat this process until both slots are routed all the way through. The slots for the track screws will look something like this.
We've got a few dovetail clamps here. We've got our glue, a brush, and we have the pieces we need to glue. Now you want the piece that's a little wider here. The 1/2 inch piece needs to go away from this wood. The other piece can go straight to it. So it's going to end up looking like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply that glue.
Keeping a nice and flush alignment here while clamping is easy with the MATCHFIT dovetail clamps.
Glue has had time to set. Let's take off our dovetail clamps. Really straightforward and easy, and it looks really clean since we did our wipe off, and I'm really pleased with that seam right there. That looks really nice. Now we could sand it a little bit, but it's so close we don't have to. This is going to go flat onto our board anyways and rotate like that using these slots for the track screws.
For more work holding options and the addition of movable stops, we're going to add a dovetail to the center of the fence. Route one time each with the relief and dovetail bits set to the proper depth. Your ZeroPlay 360 sled kit comes with 1 miter bar and 4 track screws. 2 of these track screws will allow you to attach and realign your fence as needed. Play around with placing the track nuts in different tracks to find out what works best for you. I find the most versatility of angle with the least readjustment when I arrange the track screws with the one nearest the table saw fence in a vertical track and the one farther away in a horizontal track. This will let you achieve very sharp angles. Your remaining track screws can be used to make a variety of stops for attachment either on the fence or on the base. A custom stop for the fence is easy to make and requires a through hole large enough to accommodate the screw. Straight edge retaining stops can be made using a similar process to the one we used to create the slots for the bottom of the fence. I'd also recommend checking out the dovetail pop stops for use in the fence. Their ability to depress into the groove when pushed from above, but also strongly retain when compressed into the stop, makes them a convenient and versatile solution that you can adjust and reset with just a few turns of a screwdriver. The dovetail grid in the sled base allows you to make use of the entire variety of the MATCHFIT system and combines wonderfully with the adjustability of the fence to create specific holding solutions as needed. Following the basic instructions of this guide should allow you to create any size 360 sled you want for any specific purpose you need, like a longer sled for tapering large pieces or a wider sled for better stability and accuracy with cross-cutting. If you're going to make the sled significantly longer, I recommend adding another miter bar to keep your sled safely and properly aligned for longer cuts. You may have noticed while watching the video that my sled had slight bows in the sled base and in the fence base, as well as a void in the dovetail groove in the fence. I made this sled using some scrap ply from our materials pile, and I hope this demonstrates why we recommend using 3/4 inch Baltic birch. Happy sledding, and as always, work safer, work smarter.